I'm William Brown. At my father's retirement party, he stood in front of 200 people, colleagues, executives, family, and raised his glass to toast my older brother. Said he was the one who carried the family legacy forward, the son who made him proud. Then he looked directly at me and said, "William has always been a disappointment. Never had the backbone for real business. I hope he figures out how to stand on his own 2 feet someday." Everyone went silent. I felt my face burn with humiliation. But then the company's CEO stepped forward with a manila envelope in his hand, and what he revealed didn't just shock my father, it exposed a lie that had been buried for 15 years. A lie that cost me everything I'd built. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Retirement parties at Thornfield Industries were always lavish affairs, the kind where champagne flows from ice sculptures and speeches run longer than they should. My father, Richard Brown, had built the company from a small engineering firm into a powerhouse with offices in 12 states. 42 years of his life poured into blueprints, client meetings, and 16-hour days. The grand ballroom at the Ashmont Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers. Round tables draped in cream linens filled the space, each one occupied by people who shaped the industry. Vice presidents, senior engineers, board members, and family friends who had watched the company grow from its humble beginnings in a rented office space downtown. I stood near the back, nursing a glass of scotch I hadn't touched. My wife, Amelia, placed her hand gently on my arm. She knew what these events did to me. The weight of expectation, the constant comparisons, the unspoken disappointment that followed me like a shadow whenever I stood in the same room as my father and brother. My older brother, James, sat at the head table beside our parents. He wore success like a tailored suit, comfortable and confident. Vice President of Operations at 38, married to the daughter of a state senator, living in a sprawling estate in the hills outside Blackwell Heights. Everything he touched turned to gold, or at least that's what our father always said. Me? I was the engineer who left. The one who walked away from the family business 7 years ago to start my own consulting firm. A decision my father called short-sighted, reckless, and the biggest mistake of my career. He told me I'd be back within a year, begging for my old position. When I didn't come back, when my firm actually started landing contracts and building a reputation, he stopped mentioning my work entirely. The MC, a longtime company executive named Harold Stevens, tapped the microphone. The room settled into expectant silence. He launched into a rehearsed speech about my father's legacy, his vision, his uncompromising standards, the usual accolades that accompany these events. Then my father stood. The applause was thunderous. He smiled, waving it down with practiced humility, and cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that commanded boardrooms and silenced arguments. 42 years feels like a lifetime, and in many ways, it has been. I've watched this company grow, evolve, and become something I'm incredibly proud of. He paused, letting the moment breathe. But a company is only as strong as the people who run it, and I'm leaving Thornfield in the best hands possible. His eyes shifted to James. My son, James Brown, will be taking over as CEO effective next month. There's no one I trust more to carry this legacy forward. More applause. James stood, shaking hands with those nearby, accepting congratulations with that easy charm he'd always possessed. My father raised his glass. James has always understood what it means to build something that lasts. He has the vision, the discipline, and the backbone this industry demands. I felt Amelia's grip tighten on my arm. Then my father's gaze landed on me. The room seemed to tilt slightly. My younger son William chose a different path. His tone shifted, cooler now. He left the company to pursue his own ventures. I respected that choice, even if I didn't agree with it. But I'll be honest, standing here tonight, I can't help but feel disappointed. The air went still. People stopped mid-sip, forks hovering over dessert plates. "William has always been a disappointment," he continued, each word landing like a stone. "Never had the backbone for real business. I hope he figures out how to stand on his own 2 feet someday, without relying on the Brown name to open doors for him." Heat flooded my face. My throat constricted. I wanted to disappear, to walk out, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Amelia whispered urgently, we're leaving." But before I could move, a voice cut through the stunned silence. "Richard, I think there's something you need to hear." Every head turned. Gregory Winters, the CEO of Thornfield Industries and the man who actually ran the company while my father served as chairman, stood near the podium. He held a manila envelope in one hand, his expression unreadable. My father frowned. "Greg, this isn't the time." "Actually, it's exactly the time," Winters said calmly. He walked to the podium, his footsteps echoing in the silent ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been a significant oversight tonight, one that needs to be addressed immediately." He opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. 3 months ago, Thornfield Industries was approached by Veritech Solutions for a potential acquisition. The offer was substantial, $800 million. We brought in outside consultants to assess our infrastructure, evaluate our systems, and identify any vulnerabilities before moving forward. My father's face tightened. "I'm aware of the Veritech deal, Greg. What does this have to do with—" The lead consultant, Winters interrupted, identified a critical flaw in our automated systems, a flaw that would have cost us the deal and potentially exposed us to massive liability. That consultant saved this company from a catastrophic failure. He held up the papers. That consultant was William Brown. The room erupted in whispers. I stood frozen, my mind racing. 3 months ago, I'd been hired by an intermediary firm. I didn't know the client was Thornfield. The contract was confidential, the work conducted through encrypted communications and anonymous project codes. I'd spent 6 weeks analyzing their systems, identifying the security gap, and proposing solutions. Winters continued. William's firm was hired under a blind contract to ensure objectivity. He had no idea he was working for his own father's company. And despite that, his analysis was flawless. His recommendations have been implemented, and because of his work, the Veritech deal is moving forward. My father's expression shifted from confusion to something else. Disbelief, maybe, or anger. "Furthermore," Winters said, his voice steady, "the board has reviewed William's contributions, and we'd like to make an offer. William, would you please join me at the podium?" I couldn't move. Amelia gently pushed me forward. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as I walked through the silent ballroom, past tables full of people staring, past my brother whose confident smile had vanished, past my father who stood rigid and pale. Winters extended his hand. I shook it, still not quite believing this was happening. "William," he said, turning to address the room, "on behalf of Thornfield Industries, I'd like to formally offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer. Your insight, integrity, and expertise are exactly what this company needs as we move into the future." The applause started slowly, then built into something genuine. But I wasn't looking at the crowd, I was looking at my father, whose face had gone from shock to something I'd never seen before. Shame. Growing up as Richard Brown's son meant living in a very specific kind of shadow. Not the comfortable kind that provides shade on a hot day, but the kind that makes you question whether you're even visible at all. I was 8 years old when I first realized my father saw me differently than he saw James. We were at the company's annual summer picnic, held at Ridgemont Park overlooking the valley. James, 2 years older, was playing catch with some of the executives' sons. His throws were precise, confident. People noticed. I was sitting under a tree with a sketch pad, drawing the bridge that spanned the river below. I'd always been fascinated by structures, by the way steel and concrete could be shaped into something both functional and beautiful. My father walked over, glanced at my drawing, and said, "You should be out there playing with your brother. Networking starts young, William." I looked up at him, confused. "I like drawing bridges." "Drawing doesn't build companies," he said simply, then walked away to join the executives at the grill. That became the pattern. James played sports, joined the debate team, student government, everything that looked good on a resume. I took advanced math classes, spent hours in the library studying architecture and engineering, and designed theoretical structures in notebooks I kept hidden in my desk drawer. When it came time for college, James went to Wharton, business school. Just like our father, I wanted to study structural engineering at Pacific Technical Institute. My father sat me down in his study, the same room where he conducted salary negotiations and fired underperforming employees. "Engineering is fine," he said, "but you'll get your MBA afterward. You'll join the company, work your way up, learn the business from the inside." It wasn't a suggestion. I went to Pacific Tech but spent my weekends flying back home to attend business seminars my father insisted were non-negotiable. I graduated with honors in engineering, then immediately enrolled in business school like a good son. I hated every minute of it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My then-girlfriend Amelia was the only person who saw how miserable I was. We'd met during my junior year when she was working on her teaching credential. She found me one night in the campus library, surrounded by finance textbooks, looking like I was about to break. "You know you don't have to do this, right?" she said softly, sitting down across from me. "You don't understand," I told her. "My family, they have expectations." "Expectations aren't the same as obligations," she replied, "and living someone else's life isn't going to make you happy." I married her 6 months after graduation. My father gave a toast at the wedding about how marriage teaches you responsibility and compromise. He made it sound like a business merger. I joined Thornfield Industries as a junior project manager. James was already a senior analyst, being groomed for leadership. I spent my days reviewing contracts and sitting in meetings that could have been emails, while my nights were consumed with thoughts of the work I actually wanted to do. The breaking point came during a major project, a municipal contract to redesign the infrastructure for Lakewood City's downtown district. I'd spent months developing a proposal that incorporated sustainable materials, innovative drainage systems, and cost-saving techniques I'd been researching since college. I presented it to the board. My father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed. When I finished, James spoke first. "It's ambitious, but the timeline is unrealistic. We'd be better off using the standard approach." My father nodded. "James is right. We don't have time for experimental methods. William, rework this using our proven models." "But the proven models are outdated," I argued. "This approach would save the city millions in long-term maintenance and—" "The client wants reliability, not innovation." My father cut me off. "Do it again." They went with James's version. Standard materials, conventional design, nothing that would push boundaries or challenge assumptions. The project was completed on time and on budget, and my father praised James publicly for his pragmatic leadership. My proposal sat in a drawer, gathering dust. That's when Amelia found me at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at a blank page. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. "Failing," I admitted, proving him right. "And what if you succeed?" she countered. "What if you're actually better at this than you think, and the only thing holding you back is staying somewhere that refuses to see it?" 6 months later, I handed in my resignation. My father didn't yell, he didn't argue. He just looked at me with something close to pity and said, "You'll be back." Pride only lasts so long when the bills start piling up. I started Brown Consulting Services with my savings, a laptop, and a rented office space in a building that smelled like old carpet and coffee. The first year was brutal. I took any project I could find. Small residential assessments, code compliance reviews, foundation inspections, work that barely paid enough to cover expenses. Amelia kept teaching, her salary covering our rent while I reinvested every dollar back into the business. She never once suggested I give up or go back to Thornfield. She just believed, quietly and stubbornly, even when I didn't. Slowly, the work got better. A small commercial project led to a referral. That referral led to a municipal contract. Within 3 years, I had a team of 4 engineers and a reputation for solving problems other firms considered too complex. But my father never acknowledged it. At family dinners, he'd ask James about quarterly earnings and strategic initiatives. When he turned to me, it was always, "Still doing your consulting thing?" Like it was a hobby, a phase. James, to his credit, wasn't cruel. He'd ask genuine questions about my projects, seemed interested in the work. But he was also our father's successor, the chosen one, and that created a distance between us that neither of us knew how to bridge. My mother, Linda, tried to play peacemaker. She'd call me after particularly tense dinners, telling me my father was proud in his own way, that he just didn't know how to show it. But I'd stopped waiting for his approval. I built my business, my reputation, my life, separate from the Brown family legacy, and I thought I'd made peace with that. Until tonight, when he stood in front of 200 people and called me a disappointment. Until Gregory Winters held up that envelope and changed everything. The applause was still echoing in the ballroom when I finally found my voice. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Winters," I said, trying to keep my tone professional despite the chaos in my head. "But I'm going to need some time to process this." Winters nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. We can discuss details next week." For now, I just wanted everyone here to know the truth about who really saved this deal. He turned to my father, who still stood frozen at the head table. Richard, you've built an incredible company, but you've also missed what was right in front of you. My father's jaw tightened. He looked at me, then at Winters, and without a word, walked out of the ballroom. My mother hurried after him, shooting me a confused, worried glance as she passed. The crowd began to disperse into uncomfortable small talk. Some people approached to congratulate me, others avoided eye contact entirely. James remained seated, staring at his untouched champagne glass. Amelia appeared at my side, her hand finding mine. "We should go," she whispered. But before we could leave, a woman I didn't recognize approached. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind frameless glasses. "William Brown?" she asked. "Yes." "My name is Evelyn Thomas. I'm the Director of Legal Affairs for Thornfield Industries." She handed me a business card. "I wonder if you might have a few minutes to speak privately. There's something you should know about the Veritech contract, something that didn't make it into Mr. Winters' speech." I glanced at Amelia, who gave a slight nod. We followed Evelyn to a quiet conference room off the main hallway. She closed the door carefully and gestured for us to sit. "What I'm about to tell you is confidential," Evelyn began, "but given what just happened out there, I think you deserve to know the full story." She pulled a tablet from her briefcase and opened a folder filled with documents. 3 months ago, when we hired your firm through the intermediary, it wasn't random. Your father specifically requested that you not be informed the client was Thornfield. My stomach dropped. "What?" "Richard was convinced your analysis would be biased, that you'd either go easy on the company out of family loyalty or sabotage it out of resentment. He insisted on the blind contract specifically to prove, in his words, that you weren't capable of objective, high-level work." The room felt smaller suddenly. Amelia's hand tightened around mine. Evelyn continued, "What he didn't anticipate was that you'd be brilliant. Your report was the most comprehensive analysis we've ever received. You identified vulnerabilities our own IT department had missed for years. You didn't just find the problem, you mapped out a complete solution with implementation timelines and cost projections." She slid the tablet across the table. On screen was an email chain between my father and Gregory Winters. I read in disbelief. "Richard Brown, hire William's firm, but don't tell him it's us. I want to see if he's actually as competent as he claims, or if he's just been lucky. Gregory Winters, are you sure about this, Richard? If he finds out." Richard Brown, "He won't, and when the report comes back mediocre, we'll have proof that leaving Thornfield was a mistake. Maybe it'll convince him to come back where he belongs." I read it twice, then a third time. Each word felt like a punch. "Your father expected you to fail," Evelyn said quietly. "When your report came back exceptional, he tried to bury it. He argued that we should get a second opinion, that the analysis was too aggressive, too risky. Gregory overruled him. The board voted to implement your recommendations immediately." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because Gregory is offering you the CTO position, and you need to know what you're walking into. Your father is still chairman of the board. James is about to be CEO. If you accept this role, you'll be working directly with both of them, and based on what happened tonight, I don't think your father is going to handle this well." Amelia spoke up. "What do you mean by that?" Evelyn hesitated. "Richard Brown is a man who's used to being right, used to being in control. What happened tonight, the public recognition of William's work, the job offer, it undermines the narrative he's been building for years. In my experience, people like that don't just accept being wrong, they fight back." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything. My father had set me up to fail. He'd hired me anonymously, hoping I'd prove him right, that I was mediocre, that leaving Thornfield had been a mistake born from pride rather than principle. Instead, I'd exceeded every expectation, and now he'd been exposed in front of everyone who mattered. "There's one more thing," Evelyn said. She pulled up another document. "The Veritech acquisition includes a significant equity component. Board members and C-suite executives will receive stock options as part of the deal. If you accept the CTO position, you'd be entitled to a package worth approximately $4 million over the next 3 years." The number hung in the air. "Your father knows this," she continued. He knows that bringing you in at this level fundamentally changes the family dynamics, the company hierarchy, everything. And based on his reaction tonight, I don't think he's going to let that happen without a fight. We left the hotel an hour later. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars under the yellow glow of streetlights. Amelia and I sat in our car in silence for a long moment. "What are you thinking?" she finally asked. "I'm thinking my father tried to humiliate me twice in one night," I said. "Once when he hired me hoping I'd fail, and again when he called me a disappointment in front of everyone. And both times, the truth came out anyway. So, what do you want to do?" I stared out at the empty lot, at the hotel where my father's retirement party had turned into something else entirely. Part of me wanted to walk away, to tell Winters thanks but no thanks, to keep building my own firm without the complications of family entanglement. But another part of me, the part that had spent 7 years proving I was more than my father's disappointment, wanted to walk back into that building and accept the job. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because I'd earned it. "I want to go home," I said finally, "and then I want to figure out what the hell happens next." Amelia nodded, starting the engine. As we pulled out of the parking lot, my phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. "William, it's James. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Just you and me. There are things about Dad you don't know. Things that might change how you see all of this." I stared at the message as streetlights flashed by the window, wondering what else could possibly be hidden in a family that had already revealed so much in one night. James chose a coffee shop in Millbrook, a small town halfway between our houses. Neutral territory. The kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, far from anywhere our father's colleagues might overhear. I arrived first, ordering black coffee I didn't really want. The morning rain had left everything damp and gray, water beating on the windows. I sat in the back corner, watching the door. James walked in 10 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was loosened, jacket draped over his arm, circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. He ordered something complicated with extra shots and sat down across from me without the usual pleasantries. "I'm not here to defend him," James said immediately. "I need you to know that." I waited. He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from when we were younger. "Last night, after you left, Dad went home and locked himself in his study. Mom tried talking to him, but he wouldn't open the door. Around midnight, I got a call from Evelyn Thomas." "The legal director?" "Yeah. She told me Dad had been emailing the board members, trying to get them to revoke the CTO offer. Said you'd been hired under false pretenses, that accepting the position would create a conflict of interest, that your consulting firm had outstanding contracts that would compromise your objectivity." My coffee had gone cold. I set it down carefully. "And what did the board say?" "They told him to back off. Gregory Winters called an emergency meeting this morning. Told Dad that if he didn't stop interfering, they'd ask him to resign from the chairmanship early." James leaned back, exhausted. "William, he's spiraling. And there's something else you need to know." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through emails, then turned the screen toward me. It was a forwarded message chain from 15 years ago. The subject line read, "Partnership Dissolution Agreement." I scanned the text. My chest tightened as I read. It was a contract between my father and someone named Thomas Ashford, dissolving a business partnership. The terms were brutal. Ashford had been forced out of the company with minimal compensation, signing away all rights to future profits, intellectual property, and even the use of certain methodologies he'd helped develop. "Who's Thomas Ashford?" I asked. "He was Dad's original partner when Thornfield started," James said quietly. "They built the company together, 50-50 split. But 10 years in, they had a falling out. Dad wanted to expand aggressively, take on massive debt to pursue government contracts. Ashford wanted to stay small, sustainable. They fought for months. What happened? Dad forced him out. Used a technicality in their partnership agreement. Something about decision-making authority during financial restructuring. Ashford walked away with almost nothing. The company took off 2 years later when they landed that transit system contract. Made millions." I looked at the signature at the bottom of the document. Thomas Ashford's handwriting was shaky, defeated. "Why are you showing me this?" James met my eyes. Because Ashford spent the next 5 years trying to start a competing firm. Every time he got close to landing a major contract, Dad would undercut him. Spread rumors about his reliability, his mental state, his financial instability. Ashford finally gave up and left the industry entirely. Last I heard, he was teaching at some community college in Oregon. The implications settled over me like frost. You think Dad's going to do the same thing to me? I think Dad sees you the same way he saw Ashford, James said, as someone who challenged his authority, who proved he wasn't always right. And Dad doesn't handle that well. My phone buzzed. A text from Gregory Winters. Gregory Winters, William, we need to meet. Your father just filed a formal complaint with the board alleging conflict of interest. Can you come to the office this afternoon? I showed James the message. He nodded grimly. It's already starting. We sat in silence for a moment. Rain picked up outside, drumming against the windows. Why didn't you ever tell me about Ashford? I asked. Because I didn't want to believe Dad was capable of that kind of vindictiveness, James admitted. I told myself it was just business, that these things happen. But watching what he did to you last night, the way he tried to humiliate you publicly, I can't pretend anymore. What about you? I asked. You're about to be CEO. You're still the golden son. James laughed bitterly. Am I? Because this morning, Dad called me and said if I don't actively oppose your CTO appointment, he'll consider it a betrayal. Said I need to choose between family loyalty and, quote, enabling your brother's sabotage of everything I built. What did you say? I told him I'd think about it, then I called you. He finished his coffee and set the cup down with deliberate care. William, I've spent my entire life being exactly what he wanted. I went to the right schools, took the right jobs, married the right person. And you know what? I'm miserable. I'd never heard him say anything like that before. Every decision I make, I hear his voice in my head telling me what's acceptable and what's weakness. I can't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. He looked out the window at the rain. You walked away 7 years ago and I thought you were crazy, but maybe you were just braver than me. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Amelia. William, you need to come home right now, she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. What's wrong? Someone broke into your office. The police are here. I was on my feet immediately. I'm 20 minutes away. James stood too. I'm coming with you. We drove in convoy through the rain-slicked streets. My mind raced through possibilities. Files, client information, project documentation, everything that made my business viable was in that office. The police cruiser was parked out front when we arrived. Officer Hannah Clark stood by the door, taking notes. Amelia waited on the sidewalk under an umbrella, arms wrapped around herself. Mr. Brown, Officer Clark said as I approached, your alarm company called it in about an hour ago. Looks like a forced entry through the back window. Can you come inside and tell us what's missing? The office was a disaster. File cabinets had been pried open, papers scattered across the floor. My computer was gone, along with the backup hard drive I kept in the desk drawer. But what made my stomach drop was the message spray-painted across the wall in red letters. Thief. Any idea who might have done this? Officer Clark asked. I stared at the word dripping down the white wall. I have some suspicions. James walked through the debris, his face pale. He picked up a folder from the floor. Inside were printed emails, the same chain he'd shown me at the coffee shop. The Thomas Ashford Partnership Dissolution. These weren't in your files, James said quietly. I only sent you that digitally this morning. So someone knew I'd be looking into Ashford, I said. Someone who wanted to send a message. Officer Clark's radio crackled. She stepped outside to respond. While she was gone, I found something else. A business card, deliberately placed on my keyboard. My father's name embossed in gold lettering. On the back, handwritten in his distinctive script, you should have stayed where you belonged. Amelia saw it over my shoulder. William, we need to call a lawyer. This is harassment. It's more than that, James said. He was holding another document, something that had been left on my desk chair. It was a draft termination letter addressed to me from Thornfield Industries, citing violation of non-compete agreements from my previous employment. I never signed a non-compete, I said. I know, James replied, but that won't stop him from claiming you did. He'll drag this out in court, tie up your business in litigation, make it impossible for you to work while the case is pending. This was the playbook. The same thing he'd done to Thomas Ashford. Isolate, discredit, destroy. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Gregory Winters. Gregory Winters, the board meeting is in 3 hours. Your father is pushing for an immediate vote on the CTO offer. If you want this position, you need to be here to defend yourself. Otherwise, he wins by default. I looked around my destroyed office, at the threatening message on the wall, at the manufactured evidence designed to paint me as the problem. Everything I'd built over 7 years was being systematically dismantled, and I had 3 hours to decide whether to fight back or walk away. Amelia drove while I sat in the passenger seat trying to organize my thoughts. James followed behind us in his car. We were heading to my house, the one place that still felt secure. We need evidence, Amelia said, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Real evidence that proves what your father's doing. He's too smart to leave a trail, I said. The break-in will look random. The termination letter is just a draft, not proof of anything. Even the business card could be explained away as something I had lying around. What about Thomas Ashford? If your father did the same thing to him, maybe Ashford kept records. I pulled out my phone and searched for Thomas Ashford's current information. It took 15 minutes and 3 different databases, but I finally found a faculty listing at Cascade Community College in Portland. Professor of Engineering Technology. Office hours posted, email address listed. I sent a message immediately, explaining who I was and asking if he'd be willing to talk. I didn't expect a response for days, maybe weeks. These things took time. My phone rang 30 seconds later. William Brown? The voice was older, weathered, but sharp. Richard's son? Yes, sir. I'm surprised you called so quickly. I've been waiting 15 years for someone from that family to reach out, Ashford said. What do you want to know? We talked for 40 minutes. Ashford laid out everything. The partnership, the betrayal, the systematic destruction of his reputation. He'd kept meticulous records, emails, contracts, financial statements, even recordings of phone conversations where my father had threatened him. I documented everything because I knew someday it would matter, Ashford said. But I was too tired to fight anymore. I had a wife, 2 young ones depending on me. I couldn't afford years of litigation against someone with unlimited resources. I'm facing the same thing now, I told him. He's trying to destroy my consulting business the same way he destroyed yours. There was a long pause. Your father called me last week, Ashford said finally. First time in over a decade. Wanted to know if I'd be willing to sign an affidavit stating that you'd approached me about proprietary Thornfield methodologies. Offered me $50,000. My blood ran cold. What did you say? I told him to go to hell, Ashford said simply. But the fact that he asked means he's planning something big. He's building a case, William, and if he's following the same pattern he used with me, he's got about 3 more moves planned. What moves? First, discredit you professionally. Make it look like you've been stealing trade secrets. Second, isolate you personally. Turn family, colleagues, anyone who might support you. Third, offer you a settlement, a way out that looks generous but requires you to disappear completely. It matched exactly what I was seeing. The break-in, the fake termination letter, even the public humiliation at the retirement party. How do I stop him, I asked. You don't stop him, Ashford said. You expose him. And you need someone inside Thornfield who's willing to go on record. Someone current, credible, who can corroborate that this is a pattern of behavior, not an isolated incident. I looked at James, who was sitting at my kitchen table listening to my side of the conversation. I might have someone, I said. After I hung up, James and I sat across from each other. Amelia made coffee neither of us would drink. The afternoon light filtered through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows. He called Ashford last week, I said. Tried to bribe him into signing a false statement against me. James closed his eyes. Of course he did. Ashford kept records of everything Dad did to him. 15 years of documentation. But he said I need someone inside the company to corroborate the pattern. Someone willing to testify that this isn't just about me, it's about how Dad handles anyone who challenges him. James was quiet for a long time. If I do this, it destroys my relationship with him, permanently. I know. And Mom will never forgive me. She spent 40 years defending him, making excuses. This would shatter that. I know, I repeated. James stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street. When I was 26, I made a mistake on a major contract. Cost the company about $200,000. It was my fault, completely. I owned it, went to Dad ready to accept whatever consequences came. He turned back to face me. Dad covered it up, buried the loss in a different project's budget, made sure the board never found out. Then he sat me down and said, "I protected you because you're family. Remember that when I need you to protect me." He's been holding that over you for 12 years, I said. Every decision I've made since then, every time I've gone along with something that felt wrong, I told myself I owed him, that he'd saved my career, so I owed him my loyalty. James's voice cracked slightly. But what he did to you, what he did to Ashford, what he's probably done to dozens of others, that's not leadership. That's tyranny. Amelia spoke up from where she'd been quietly listening. James, whatever you decide, it has to be your choice. Not because William needs you, not because you owe anyone anything, because it's right. My brother sat back down at the table. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, then stopped on a name. Gregory Winters. "If I call him," James said, "if I tell him I'll testify about Dad's pattern of behavior, about Ashford, about the pressure he put on me this morning, there's no going back." "Then don't do it," I said. "I'll find another way." James looked at me with something between sadness and resolve. "There is no other way, you know that. Dad spent 40 years building power, connections, leverage. The only way to stop him is to hit him where he can't defend himself. With the truth, from someone he can't discredit." He pressed dial before he could change his mind. "Gregory, it's James Brown. I need to talk to you about the board meeting this afternoon, about my father and the CTO position." He paused, listening. "No, I'm not calling to support him. I'm calling because there are things the board needs to know, things I should have said years ago." The conversation lasted 20 minutes. James laid it out calmly, factually. The Ashford situation, the pressure tactics, the attempted bribery, the pattern of destroying anyone who challenged his authority. Gregory asked questions, took notes, confirmed details. When James hung up, his hands were shaking. "He's calling an expanded board meeting," James said. "Wants both of us there. He's also contacting Ashford, asking if he'll appear via video conference to present his documentation." "What did Winters say about Dad?" Amelia asked. "He said the chairmanship was always meant to be ceremonial after retirement. But if there's evidence of ongoing misconduct, the board has grounds to remove him entirely." James looked at me. "William, this is going to get ugly, really ugly." My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Linda Brown, your brother just called your father a liar to the board. What have you done to this family?" Then another text, this one from my father. "Richard Brown, you've turned my own son against me. I hope you're proud of destroying everything I built. This isn't over." I showed the messages to James. He read them, and then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not happy, but something close to liberated. "He always said that," James said. "Everything I built, like he did it alone. Like the hundreds of people who worked for him, who contributed ideas and effort and years of their lives, like they were just tools he used." He looked at his own phone, at the angry text starting to flood in. Maybe it's time someone reminded him that empires built on fear don't last. The board meeting was in 90 minutes. We had that long to prepare for the fight that would either vindicate everything I'd worked for or destroy what was left of my family. Amelia squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together." I nodded, but I was thinking about Thomas Ashford, about 15 years of silence, about all the people my father had crushed who never got their chance to speak. Today, that silence was ending. The Thornfield Industries boardroom occupied the entire top floor of their downtown headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, glass and steel stretching in every direction. I'd been in this room exactly twice before, both times as a junior employee sitting in the back, taking notes nobody read. Today I walked in as the subject of discussion. The board members were already seated around the massive conference table, 12 people who controlled billions in contracts and thousands of jobs. Gregory Winters sat at the head, his expression carefully neutral. My father sat 3 seats down, his jaw set, eyes fixed on the table in front of him. James and I took seats on the opposite side. Amelia had wanted to come, but this was board members only. She was waiting downstairs in the lobby with coffee she probably wouldn't drink and a book she definitely wouldn't read. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Winters began. "We have several matters to address regarding the CTO position and allegations that have been raised. "William, thank you for being here." I nodded, trying to keep my breathing steady. "Richard, you filed a formal complaint alleging conflict of interest in violation of prior employment agreements. Would you like to present your case?" My father stood, pulling out a folder thick with documents. His voice was controlled, professional, the same tone he used to command boardrooms for 4 decades. 3 months ago, this board hired an outside consulting firm without my knowledge to assess our systems before the Veritech acquisition. That firm was owned and operated by my son, William. He had access to proprietary information, trade secrets, and sensitive data that he legally should not have possessed due to non-compete agreements signed during his employment here. He slid copies of a document across the table. I recognized my signature at the bottom, but the language was different from what I remembered signing. "This is a fraudulent document," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" My father's eyes snapped to mine. "I never signed a non-compete agreement. I signed a standard confidentiality agreement when I left, nothing more. That document has been altered." Winters picked up the paper, examining it closely. "Richard, do you have the original?" "This is the original," my father said, "filed with HR 7 years ago." "Then we should be able to pull the digital copy from the archives," Winters said. He nodded to his assistant, who began typing on a laptop. My father's expression flickered, just for a moment. The digital systems were upgraded 2 years ago. Some older files may not have transferred properly. "How convenient," James said. Every head turned toward him. He'd been silent until now, and his voice carried weight. "Dad, I was VP of operations when we did that systems upgrade. Every employment contract was specifically flagged for preservation. If William's non-compete existed, it would be in the archives." "James, you don't understand the technical details." "I understand enough to know when something doesn't add up." James pulled out his own laptop and opened a file. "I also understand that this isn't the first time you've used questionable documentation to remove someone you saw as a threat." The room went very still. "What are you talking about?" one of the board members, a woman named Grace Harris, asked. James took a breath. 15 years ago, my father forced out his business partner, Thomas Ashford, using similar tactics. Altered agreements, manufactured conflicts of interest, systematic destruction of his professional reputation. My father's face went pale, then red. That was a legitimate business dissolution. "Mr. Ashford is joining us now via video conference," Winters interrupted, gesturing to the screen on the wall. "I think we should hear his account directly." The screen flickered to life. Thomas Ashford appeared, sitting in what looked like a home office, bookshelves behind him. He was older than the photos I'd seen, gray hair and deep lines around his eyes, but his gaze was sharp and clear. "Thank you for allowing me to participate," Ashford said. "I'm going to be direct because I've wasted enough years being silent about what happened." For the next 20 minutes, Ashford walked through the partnership dissolution. He presented contracts, emails, financial records, all meticulously organized. He showed how my father had manipulated board votes, altered meeting minutes, and used legal technicalities to force him out with minimal compensation. "But the worst part wasn't losing the company," Ashford said, his voice steady but strained. "It was what came after. Every time I tried to start over, Richard would interfere. He'd call potential clients, spread rumors about my stability, my competence. He made it impossible for me to work in this industry." "That's defamation," my father said sharply. "Pure fabrication from someone bitter about a failed partnership." "I have recordings," Ashford said simply. He played an audio file. My father's voice came through the speakers, younger but unmistakable, speaking to someone on the phone. "Thomas Ashford?" "I wouldn't recommend him. He had some personal issues while he was here, reliability problems. We had to let him go. I'd look elsewhere if I were you." The date stamp on the recording was 3 years after the dissolution, when Ashford had been trying to land a municipal contract. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Winters looked at my father. "Richard, do you have a response?" My father stood, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "This is a coordinated attack. My sons have conspired with a disgruntled former partner to destroy my reputation. I've given 42 years to this company, and this is how I'm treated." "Nobody's attacking you, Dad," James said quietly. "We're just telling the truth." "The truth?" My father's voice rose. "The truth is that I built this company from nothing. I made the hard decisions, took the risks, carried the weight while everyone else. He stopped, breathing hard. Grace Harris spoke up. Richard, I've served on this board for 18 years. I've watched you lead this company with strength and vision. But if even half of what we've heard today is accurate, that leadership came at a cost we can't ignore. Another board member, Samuel Thompson, nodded. The Veritech deal is worth $800 million. We can't move forward if there are questions about how we treat our consultants, our employees, our partners. This isn't just about family dynamics. It's about the company's integrity. My father looked around the table, seeing the shift in the room. You're going to believe them over me? After everything I've done? We're going to investigate thoroughly, Winters said. And until that investigation is complete, I'm recommending that Richard step down from the chairmanship, effective immediately. You can't do that. The board can, and we are, Winters said firmly. This is not a punishment, Richard. It's a necessary step to protect the company while we sort out these allegations. My father grabbed his folder and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back to look at James and me. You've destroyed this family, he said, his voice cold and flat. I hope you can live with that. The door closed behind him with a sharp click. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Winters cleared his throat. William, the CTO offer still stands, but I need to know, given everything that's happened, are you still interested in the position? I looked at the board members, at the city stretching out beyond the windows, at James, who sat rigid and pale beside me. Can I have until tomorrow to decide? I asked. Winters nodded. Take the time you need. This has been difficult for everyone. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some offering sympathetic nods, others avoiding eye contact entirely. James and I were the last to leave. In the elevator, neither of us spoke. The numbers counted down, floor by floor, until we reached the lobby where Amelia was waiting. She took one look at my face and knew. It's done? It's done, I said. James's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression crumbled. Mom says I'm not welcome at the house anymore. She says I chose you over family. James, I'm sorry. Don't, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Don't apologize for telling the truth. I just need some time to process that the family I thought I had never really existed. He walked out into the parking garage alone. Amelia wrapped her arm around mine. Let's go home. But as we walked to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. My father had spent 40 years building power, and men like that don't surrender after one board meeting. They regroup, adapt, and strike back harder. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Your father just withdrew $500,000 from his personal accounts. Thought you should know. Be careful. Josh E.T. Evelyn Thomas, the legal director, was watching out for me. I showed Amelia the message. She read it, and her grip on my arm tightened. What's he planning? She whispered. I didn't have an answer, but I knew that whatever came next, it would be the real fight. Everything until now had just been the opening moves. 3 days after the board meeting, I sat alone in my home office at 2 in the morning, staring at a blank email draft addressed to Gregory Winters. The subject line read, Declining CTO Position. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't make myself type the first word. Around me, the house was silent. Amelia had gone to bed hours ago after sitting with me, listening to me spiral through the same circular thoughts I'd been wrestling with since we left Thornfield headquarters. The cost of truth was starting to reveal itself in ways I hadn't anticipated. James hadn't spoken to our mother in 3 days. She'd called him 17 times, each voicemail progressively more hurt, then angry, then pleading. He'd played one for me earlier that evening, his hands shaking as he held the phone. Her voice had been raw, breaking. How could you do this to your father? To me? After everything we've sacrificed for you, you stand up in front of the board and humiliate him. Your own father, James. I don't even know who you are anymore. James had deleted it without listening to the rest, but I could see it eating at him. The guilt, the doubt, the wondering if we'd gone too far. My own phone had been quieter. My mother hadn't called me at all, which somehow felt worse than the anger James was receiving. I'd become invisible again, the disappointment not even worth confronting. The business fallout was mounting too. 2 of my consulting contracts had been suddenly terminated, both clients citing vague concerns about conflicts of interest. I knew my father's fingerprints were on those cancellations, but I couldn't prove it. 3 other potential clients had stopped returning my calls. Evelyn Thomas had sent another warning text yesterday. Your father hired Marcus Tharvin, the most aggressive litigation attorney in the state. Expect legal action soon. I'd researched Tharvin. His specialty was destroying people in court, dragging out cases until his opponents ran out of money and willpower. He'd bankrupted 6 small businesses in the last 2 years alone, all while representing corporate giants with unlimited legal budgets. My savings account had maybe enough to cover 3 months of that kind of fight. Maybe. The email draft stared back at me, cursor blinking in the empty body of the message. If I declined the CTO position, walked away from Thornfield entirely, maybe my father would back off. Maybe he'd see it as a victory and leave my consulting business alone. Maybe James could reconcile with our parents, and this whole nightmare could fade into an uncomfortable family story we'd never discuss at holidays. Maybe I could go back to the quiet, invisible life I'd built for myself. Safe, small, unnoticed. I started typing. Dear Gregory, after careful consideration, I've decided that accepting the CTO position at Thornfield Industries would not be in the best interest of the company or my family. The events of the past week have created divisions that I don't believe can be... I stopped. Read it back. It sounded reasonable, mature, like the kind of graceful exit people would respect. It also sounded like surrender dressed in professional language. I deleted the paragraph and tried again. Dear Gregory, I appreciate the opportunity, but given the current family situation, I think it's best if I... Delete. Dear Gregory, I'm writing to inform you. Delete. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from James. You awake? I called him instead of texting back. He answered on the first ring. Can't sleep either? I asked. Haven't slept more than 2 hours a night since the board meeting, James admitted. His voice sounded hollow, exhausted. I keep thinking about what Mom said. About not knowing who I am anymore. James, what if she's right? He interrupted. What if I've spent so long being who Dad wanted that I don't actually have any identity of my own? What if the only reason I stood up in that boardroom was because I was angry, not because it was right? I leaned back in my chair, pressing my free hand against my eyes. You stood up because you saw a pattern of harm and decided it needed to stop. Or I destroyed our family because I wanted to feel important for once in my life. His laugh was bitter. You know what the worst part is? Part of me feels relieved. Like I've been waiting for permission to stop pretending, and that board meeting finally gave it to me. What kind of person feels relief when their family falls apart? The kind who's been suffocating for 38 years, I said quietly. Silence on the other end of the line. I'm thinking about declining the CTO offer, I admitted. Just walking away from all of it. Why? Because look at what it's cost. Your relationship with Mom. My consulting contracts. Dad's hiring a lawyer specifically known for destroying people. This isn't just a job offer anymore, James. It's a war, and I'm not sure winning is worth what we're losing. What did Amelia say? She said it's my choice, that she'll support whatever I decide. I stared at the blank email, but I can see it in her eyes. She's scared. Not of Dad, but of what this is doing to me. I haven't slept, barely eaten. I'm obsessing over every email, every text, waiting for the next attack. So you're going to give him what he wants, James said. You're going to prove him right. The words hit harder than I expected. That's not fair, I said. Isn't it? James's voice gained an edge. He said you didn't have the backbone for real business, that you'd never make it without the Brown name. If you walk away now, after everything we've exposed, after Thomas Ashford finally got to tell his story, you're just confirming every terrible thing Dad ever said about you. And if I stay, if I take the position and spend the next year fighting him in court while he systematically destroys everything I've built, what does that prove? That you're not him, James said simply, that you can build something without crushing people underneath it. That success doesn't require cruelty. I wanted to argue, to point out all the logical reasons why walking away made sense. But the words caught in my throat because somewhere deep down I knew he was right. I'm tired, James, I said finally. I'm so tired of fighting for scraps of dignity from a man who'll never give them. Then stop fighting for his approval and start fighting for yourself. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for another hour. The email draft was still open, still blank except for the greeting and that abandoned first sentence. I thought about Thomas Ashford, about 15 years of silence, about teaching at a community college when he should have been leading major engineering projects. I thought about all the talented people my father had probably crushed over 4 decades, people whose names I'd never know because they'd been erased so thoroughly. I thought about the message spray-painted on my office wall, Thief. My father's attempt to rewrite reality, to make me the villain in a story where he'd always been the hero. And I thought about something Amelia had said weeks ago, before any of this started, during a conversation about my consulting business. We'd been talking about a difficult client, someone who kept trying to undervalue my work. "You know what your problem is?" she'd said, not unkindly. "You still act like you need permission to take up space, like you have to apologize for being good at what you do." At the time, I'd brushed it off. Now, sitting in the dark with that blank email mocking me, I understood what she meant. I'd spent my entire life making myself smaller to fit into my father's vision of what I should be. When that didn't work, I'd built a separate life, but even that I'd kept quiet, modest, careful not to draw too much attention or make waves that might disturb the uneasy peace with my family. The CTO position wasn't just a job. It was the most visible, undeniable proof that I was exactly as capable as I'd always claimed to be. It was walking into the company my father built and being recognized not because of his name, but in spite of it. And that terrified me. Not because I couldn't do the work. I knew I could. The Veritech assessment proved that. I was terrified because accepting meant I could never hide again. It meant standing fully in the light and accepting that some people, including my own father, would hate me for it. It meant choosing my own path, knowing it would cost me the fantasy of ever having the family I'd always wanted. I closed the email draft without saving it. Then I opened a new message, this one addressed to Amelia even though she was asleep in the next room. "I'm taking the position. Not because I'm brave, but because I'm finally more afraid of disappearing than I am of being seen. I love you. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." I hit send, then heard her phone buzz in the bedroom. A moment later, soft footsteps in the hallway. Amelia appeared in the doorway, reading the message on her phone screen. She looked up at me, eyes wet but smiling. "It's about time," she said. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "You're going to be brilliant," she whispered. "And whatever comes next, we'll handle it together." I pulled up a new email, this one to Gregory Winters. "Dear Gregory, I'm honored to accept the position of Chief Technology Officer at Thornfield Industries. I understand the road ahead won't be easy, but I'm committed to bringing integrity, innovation, and leadership to the role. When can we discuss start dates and transition plans?" I read it 3 times, checking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that I was making a mistake. I found none. My finger hovered over the send button for just a moment. Then I pressed it. The email whooshed away into the digital void, and with it went the last possibility of retreat. I'd made my choice. Now I had to live with the consequences. Amelia squeezed my shoulder. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I admitted, but also, for the first time in weeks, like I can actually breathe. Outside, dawn was just beginning to break over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. A new day carrying whatever came next. I was ready for it. Gregory Winters called me at 7:30 that same morning, less than 2 hours after I'd sent the acceptance email. "William, I got your message," he said, his voice carrying relief I hadn't expected. "I'm glad you're accepting the position. We need to move quickly on the transition, but first, there's something you should know." I was already dressed, coffee in hand, standing at the kitchen window watching the sunrise finish painting the sky. Amelia sat at the table behind me, listening. "What is it?" I asked. "Your father filed a lawsuit yesterday afternoon. He's suing you personally for theft of intellectual property, breach of fiduciary duty, and tortious interference with business relationships. He's also suing Thornfield Industries for wrongful termination, though technically he resigned from the chairmanship." The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "How much is he asking for?" $12 million in damages, plus legal fees and punitive damages that could push it higher. Winters paused. William, I want you to know that Thornfield's legal team will support you fully. This lawsuit is baseless, and we have the resources to fight it. But I need you to understand what you're walking into. A war, I said quietly. A very public, very expensive war. Your father has already given interviews to 3 industry publications. He's positioning himself as the victim, the founder pushed out by ungrateful offspring, and a disloyal board. The narrative he's building is compelling, and some people are buying it. I set down my coffee cup before my shaking hands could spill it. What do we do? We fight with facts, documentation, and witnesses. Evelyn Thomas is coordinating with our litigation team. She wants to meet with you this afternoon to start building your defense. We're also reaching out to Thomas Ashford to see if he'll provide a deposition about the pattern of behavior. He will, I said. He's been waiting 15 years for this. Good. There's one more thing. Winters' tone shifted slightly. The board wants to make a public statement supporting your appointment as CTO. We want to get ahead of your father's narrative. Show that this decision was based on merit, and that the company stands behind it. But that means you'll be in the spotlight, answering questions, facing scrutiny. Are you ready for that? I looked at Amelia. She nodded once, firmly. I'm ready, I said. The meeting with Evelyn Thomas took place at a law office in the financial district. All polished wood and leather chairs that probably cost more than my first car. She brought 3 other attorneys, each with thick folders of documentation. Let's start with the intellectual property claim, Evelyn said, spreading papers across the conference table. Your father alleges that you stole proprietary methodologies and trade secrets from Thornfield during your employment and used them to build your consulting business. That's absurd, I said. I developed my own assessment frameworks from scratch. Nothing I use came from Thornfield. We know that, but we need to prove it. Do you have early drafts of your methodologies, development notes, anything that shows independent creation with timestamps predating your departure from Thornfield? I thought about the notebooks in my home office, the ones I'd kept hidden in desk drawers during college and my early years at the company. Ideas sketched out late at night, concepts developed in secret because I knew they wouldn't be welcomed. I have notebooks going back 12 years, I said. Handwritten, dated. They show the evolution of my approach over time. Evelyn smiled. Perfect. We'll need those scanned and authenticated. What about the breach of fiduciary duty claim? One of the other attorneys, a sharp-eyed woman named Chloe Martinez, spoke up. That one's trickier. He's arguing that by accepting the CTO position, you're violating a duty of loyalty to him as your father, that you're using family information against him. Family information isn't proprietary, I said, and I don't have a fiduciary duty to my father. I have a professional obligation to do good work, which is what I did with the Veritech assessment. Exactly, Chloe said, but he's trying to blur the lines between family relationships and professional obligations. It's emotionally manipulative, but legally weak. We just need to keep the focus on facts. We spent the next 3 hours going through every aspect of my career, every project, every client relationship. They asked questions I'd never considered, probing for weaknesses in my timeline, inconsistencies in my story. It was exhausting, but necessary. When we finally took a break, Evelyn pulled me aside. How are you holding up? She asked. Honestly, I feel like I'm being dissected, I admitted. But I understand why it's necessary. Your father is going to throw everything at you. Personal attacks, professional allegations, attempts to discredit your character. The depositions will be brutal. He'll try to make you lose your temper, say something we can't take back. She met my eyes. You need to stay calm, stick to facts, and remember that the truth is on your side. What if the truth isn't enough? I asked. Then we make it enough, she said simply. That evening, James came over to the house. He looked better than he had during our late-night phone call, showered and dressed, but there was a heaviness to him that hadn't been there before. I talked to Mom today, he said, accepting the beer Amelia offered him. Actually talked, not just listened to voicemails. How did it go? I asked. She cried, a lot. Said she feels like she's losing her whole family, that everything she built her life around is falling apart. He took a long drink. Then she asked me to testify on Dad's behalf in the lawsuit. The words hung in the air. What did you say? Amelia asked gently. I said no. Told her I love her, but I can't lie under oath to protect Dad from consequences he brought on himself. James set down the beer bottle. She hung up on me. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. It needed to be said." He looked at me directly. "But I need you to know something. I'm going to testify in your case." Evelyn Thomas already contacted me. I'm going to tell them everything I know about Dad's business practices, about Ashford, about the pressure tactics. It's going to make things worse with Mom, probably permanently. "James, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "Because if I don't, I'm just another person who stayed silent while someone abused their power. I'm done being that person." We sat together for a while, not saying much, just three people bracing for the storm that was coming. The next morning, Thornfield Industries issued their public statement. It was professional, factual, and unambiguous in its support. Thornfield Industries is proud to announce William Brown as our new Chief Technology Officer. Mr. Brown's exceptional analysis and innovative solutions were instrumental in securing our recent acquisition partnership. His appointment is based solely on merit, expertise, and the demonstrated value he brings to our organization. We look forward to his leadership as we move into our next chapter of growth. Within an hour, my father's response appeared in the industry press. "I am deeply disappointed that the company I built has chosen to reward disloyalty and deception. My son William used his position as a family member to gain access to sensitive information, then exploited that access for personal gain. This appointment is a betrayal of everything Thornfield Industries was meant to stand for." The battle lines were drawn. My phone started buzzing with calls from reporters, former colleagues, even people I'd gone to college with who suddenly wanted to reconnect and hear my side of the story. I ignored most of them, but one call I answered. Thomas Ashford. "I saw the news," he said. "Looks like history is repeating itself, except this time, someone's fighting back." "I couldn't have done it without your testimony," I told him. "You could have. You chose not to do it alone, which is smarter than I was." He paused. "William, I want you to know something. When your father destroyed my career, I spent years being angry, bitter. I let it poison relationships, opportunities, everything. Don't let him do that to you." "How do I avoid it?" I asked. "You remember that this isn't about him. It's about you building something better. He can take away money, reputation, even family. But he can't take away what you know how to do, or who you are when nobody's watching." Ashford's voice was firm. "Win or lose this lawsuit, you've already proven you're not him. Don't forget that." After we hung up, I stood in my office looking at the boxes of notebooks Evelyn's team had asked me to bring in for authentication. 12 years of private thoughts, ideas developed in secret, proof that I'd been building toward this moment long before I consciously knew it. Amelia appeared in the doorway. "The legal team is sending a courier to pick those up in an hour. You ready?" I looked at everything I'd created, everything I'd kept hidden because I didn't think it was worth defending. "Yeah," I said, "I'm ready." The preparation was done, the evidence was gathered, the witnesses were lined up. Now came the hard part, facing my father in court and letting the truth speak for itself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.